How's it going, everybody? My name is Christian Diaz. It's your boy, the Not Happy Boy, here bringing you another special broadcast here with a very special guest. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Brian Yurachek, how you doing, everyone?
Well, on this side, we're doing pretty good. So I kind of wanted to really start off with understanding who Brian Yurachek is. Here at the Not Happy broadcast, we really like to delve into the people, and we really like to see and get a grasp of who they are, what they do, and why they do it. So, my first question to you is going to be taking you straight back into your childhood. What was that like?
Well, I grew up in a single mother household with my sister. My parents split when I was pretty young, so my father would pick us up every other weekend. So we did see my father, and he remarried. So I had a stepbrother and a stepsister. So I had, in some ways, a pretty normal childhood, just kind of going back and forth between two families. But my mother's household was very strict. She celebrated culture though, and we went on trips. So we didn't have much money. What was interesting was there was never really anything under the Christmas tree, but we always went somewhere around the world for a few weeks every year. So my mother was very frugal and very specific with the way she spent money, but she always spent that money, as I realized when I got older, on cultural experiences and us going to museums and seeing art, and really going to different places around the world. So in some ways it was very difficult because it was a very strict household to grow up in, but we were given things that later in life I realized were very valuable.
And I was gonna stop you there too, because I kind of grew up in a very similar situation in which like my parents worked. They weren't they didn't divorce until like last year, but they kind of like it wasn't oh the problems are always there, and so the problems are always about money, and so it wasn't like about gift giving. But I don't remember any gifts given as a child really all that much, but it was about the experiences,
Mhm.
going to the fair and riding on the first elephant, going to the parks and seeing the huge enormous trees, seeing the Everglades. It was about the little simple things. And so I guess you could say that you growing up, you never really tied value to presents all that much, but more of like experiences.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that's really where we're moving a lot, in this new world, so to speak. Is we're moving away from things and people making things, and less emphasis, I think, hopefully, on things over time, and more emphasis on knowledge transfer and data and culture, honestly, and the sharing of our human spirit with each other. Ultimately, that's what I see as the new currency, and I think what my mom was trying to emphasize, probably in yours as well.
No, for sure. A lot of people, I don't even want to say a lot of people, it's just the newer generation. They may kind of equate the two and be like, we grew up and our way of getting home was the stoplight or the street lights. So if those things are off, dude, you better get your ass home. But if nowadays like your mom's gonna text you, hey,
Yeah.
come home and stuff. And so it kind of takes away a little bit of that experience. But that's kind of really interesting. For those that may not know, I've known Brian for a good minute now, and every single time I learn something new about him that kind of leads into his adulthood. You're a huge art guy,
Mhm.
and so probably going to these museums as a kid probably really sparked that interest. Did you start um, being artistically inclined early on, or is that something that you found in your teens or early adulthood?
Yeah, well, my mom, again, she always emphasized formal involvement in these types of things as well. So we were encouraged to join chorus. I sang in chorus for quite some time. We did a lot of sports, a lot of different sports. And my grandfather was actually very integral in introducing us to all these things. And we would go to Dallas, Texas, actually, for a month over the summer to visit him, and my grandmother. And we had a very regimented day. We would wake up, we would go to swimming lessons, we would then go to soccer with the Dallas Sidekicks in this special camp that we went to. Then we would go to like a basketball camp later in the afternoon, and then we would go fishing. It was My grandfather introduced us to so many different things, but it was a very regimented schedule now that I think back on it. Very military-esque, and he was a military veteran. But yeah, I got introduced to the drums through my grandfather. So we used to walk around music stores because he was a pianist. He was actually a ragtime pianist. And he never was able to really explore doing that as a professional career, even though he wanted to. He played piano up until the very end of his life, actually. It was the one thing that he still actually had function with and muscle memory for, even when he could barely remember my name. So it just shows how powerful music and art is. But yeah, about around the age 7, I started playing drums. He gave me this Noble and Cooley drum set. For anyone who knows drumming, that's a very nice, good brand to this day. And I quickly kind of upgraded that to a larger, more extensive kit. But I didn't really get into physical art and what I do a lot of now till probably my early teens, and then I stopped for quite some time until about a few years ago. But my father was also a physical artist and did a lot of crossover work by putting physical objects, much like I do now, incorporating the physical and the digital. My father would glue sand on some of his paintings, and I remember, glue seeds and certain things. So yeah, it's always been kind of a part of my family, I suppose, and something I was introduced to when I was younger.
Yeah, so pretty much at some point in time you were going to dabble in the arts, it seemed, or at least it would have been harder for you not to.
Yeah.
Um, who would you say were some influences during this time? I heard your grandfather and your mother, but were you someone that kind of looked at the media as well? Did you have any influences there, or was it more like structured around the people around you?
No, I very much immersed myself in a lot of the early 90s to mid 90s kind of grunge music scene. So,
Mm.
obviously the mainstays like Nirvana and Stone Temple Pilots and eventually Foo Fighters, right? After Kurt died. But I listened to a lot of like Toadies and Silverchair and Alice in Chains and a lot of stuff that my sister listened to, right? So my sister would go through these phases, right? So she had the big Doc Martens on and she was listening to metal. So, I would listen to Alice in Chains then. And then she would introduce me to like other stuff like Tupac and like stuff when she got into hip hop and rap. And then I started getting the pass down of all those CDs. And in fact, my sister would sell me those CDs. She wouldn't even give me them. She would sell them to me. So it just goes, it was rough. It was rough in my household. You had to really cough up the money for CDs. And I was like, I think she charged me $10 a CD. I remember I bought my first album off of her. It was Nirvana Live Unplugged in New York. Was actually the first like album I bought off my sister. But yeah, my influences, I would say, are many of those individuals. Like from a drumming standpoint, Brad Wilk in Rage Against the Machine, just an incredible drummer, incredible production off of that album, Evil Empire. The album Evil Empire by Rage Against the Machine is one of the most influential albums on my drumming and just my musicality in general. Just to this day, incredible drum production on that album. He doesn't get enough credit actually for that, artistically as well. But Gene Krupa was actually my real initial introduction. That came via my grandfather. So my grandfather gave me a DCI tape. It's these old drum corps tapes. And it was a VHS, and I watched this tape. And at the beginning of it, it had the opening scene of Benny Goodman and Gene Krupa playing Sing, Sing, Sing. And I saw Gene, and Gene was part of the movement with Buddy Rich in bringing drums to the forefront as a solo instrument. Prior to that, drummers sat in the background and they just
Yeah.
held everything down. Don't do anything flashy. Don't do anything too crazy. Let everyone else kind of do their thing, and you just hold the tempo. Well, Gene and Buddy kind of kicked the entire door open, and in fact, they played like flamboyantly, like they would move their arms in these ways that were totally inefficient from an actual technical perspective, like doing,
Yeah.
Gene would do these weird things where he'd lift his hands, and it was totally like it probably was part of a function of how stylistically his timing worked out because of how he moved, but it wasn't like a technical, you would never really do that. But they would hit the undersides of cymbals, the oversides, and then hit them straight on. They would do really crazy stuff. And it was just, to me, it was like um, a way to just be so magical with an instrument.
No, it gives a different kind of finesse, and I don't even think people can imagine drummers now without them doing, the whole head banging,
Mhm.
and it's choreographed. I mean, it's something that fits into their style of who they are. So it's crazy to hear that you learned it off of VHS tape,
Yeah,
because a
yeah. I
lot of
mean,
people nowadays wouldn't even know what that is.
yeah, I mean that's where I really got the intro. But then a lot of it was just practice, and I would do like weird things. I would blindfold myself sometimes and just solo for an hour, and it helped me understand where everything was like, and just helped my muscle memory. So I just would come home and sometimes play from like, what, I get home 3:30 from school or something when I was in grade school, and then just practice till like 6 p.m. at night, because then my mom would get home, maybe at around 6. So I practiced for 3 hours. So where other people may have just been skateboarding or doing other things, which is great, and some of those people probably went on to be professional skateboarders, I just played drums a lot of the time.
Dude, that's awesome. And so you got a good list of influences of people. Did you ever feel like music was gonna be the way you made your way in this world?
Not really. Unfortunately, as much as my mom emphasized like art and music, there was always that barrier of like, but just to hear, and that's it, right? Like just to hear, and that's nice, and put it over there, right? And it's a hobby, right? So which was okay, I suppose, because I kind of understood that the reality was it was really difficult, and probably would have been a real difficult road if I had gone that direction. Haphazardly, I kind of did go that direction, just not fully as my profession. So I ended up going to military school when I was 14, and I ended up then playing in the regimental band later on, and having a scholarship, and traveled around the world playing music. So what's weird is I ended up kind of in music school, and we literally played music from 6 a.m. till 9:30 a.m. every morning. We have rehearsal. I had private lessons. I basically went to music school because I was given that scholarship, and I had obligations I had to meet for that money. In addition to traveling and playing, like practice and doing local parades and shows and things. So yeah, just very interesting how it became a part of something I did, and then even when I left Valley Forge, and I went into my undergrad years and at Fordham and then St. Joe's. I continued playing in like a wedding band, when I was in Pennsylvania. And then when I moved back to New York, I obviously took up and played with a few bands for over a decade. So,
Wedding bands. So how many weddings do you think you played at?
oh, geez, it wasn't that many actually, because we like did a lot of practicing. And so I think I played like 4 weddings, but the set list, I have it somewhere here still because I pulled it out the other day. The set list was like 140 something songs long. So I knew like 140 covers like at the time of like crazy stuff, like all that normal wedding music, like Journey, like
Dang.
Don't Stop Believing, like, just silly kind of, but we played a lot of like, we played a lot of funky weddings too. Like we catered to like people who like the Grateful Dead and like Zeppelin and stuff, and the classic rock crowd. So we played a lot of like weird tunes like that too. And so the wedding band was called Wasabi, but our claim to fame was that we got cast on the television show How to Make It in America with Kid Cudi and Louis Guzman and all those guys, and Lake Bell. So I remember I drove at 4 in the morning all the way to a country club in Long Island. And at this country club was the set of this episode. I think it was season 2, episode 4, and it was like someone was getting married, and we were the wedding band in the background playing "Come On, Eileen," and uh,
Wow.
and so I remember I met Lake Bell and talked to her for like 10 minutes, and her mind was blown because she was like, wait, you're in a real wedding band? She's like, no, you're an actor. And I'm like, no, 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 I know I'm acting. I was like, I'm a featured extra. I was a featured extra, but I wasn't like, I was really in a wedding band, and we really did play, and they used the audio actually, of us. They did not overdub it, which was really interesting. And then when she walked away, all the girls from the band ran over and were like, what did she say? And I had no idea I was talking to Lake Bell. I had no idea she was the star of the show.
Wow.
So it was just kind of fun.
No, but I mean, dude, you've actually gotten to. I like to tell because I used to dabble in music myself.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted it to be. I wanted to be rich and famous off of it before I realized that I really did it just more therapeutically than anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of like gave up on that. But it's very interesting how I like to tell people that even though you didn't get to be big and famous, I still got to play at shows. I still got to do these different things, and it still felt like somewhat of a career. And so you got to go around the world, you got to meet, good people, and then you got to have your music in something. And so that's something that I like to tell people that is still a career in music. And any career in music is any career in music. But you have mentioned that you've dropped how many albums?
Oh, geez. Well, a lot of them have been EPs, but I think over 10 now, total. Yeah, of professional recordings that I've been on. Yeah, I think it's about 10, across all the bands, probably 3 or 4 different bands that I've played with over the time. Mainly two, Jillian and Valentine Marks are the two main bands I've played with.
Dude. Well, I really feel like if you didn't have all of these other projects that you're working on, music would probably be the thing that you focus on the most. But kind of moving on to the next thing, where did the New York Culture Club come from? Everyone's probably wondering why the fuck I have this chip behind my head, but it
A chip.
has it has some good meaning to it. So do you kind of want to go into that?
Yeah, so New York Culture Club, by its definition, is a brand, a lifestyle and apparel and fashion brand born into Web3, right? So we're born right into Web3. We're not changing a business model. We are trying to embody as best we can the principles and values that we believe will get us all to a better place where we can all get better together. New York Culture Club really started as an idea of just all of us sharing our culture, and being able to share our music, share our ideas, share our pain, share our joy, right? So in some cases, I would run with a friend of mine in the mornings, and we would talk about life's problems sometimes. Sometimes we talked about his issues. Sometimes we talked about my issues. And it always just kind of organically took its form as we showed up at Roosevelt Island to go for this run. So to me, that was a culture club, right? So everything really to me, around me, and sharing, and trying to understand others and their needs was really New York Culture Club. But the business itself, has a vessel for really communicating all of those core principles and values and those things that we hold true and believe in, and that is apparel and fashion. And throughout the years, in addition to some of that art that I was kind of talking about in my early teens or mid-teens, I would also kind of make disruptive T-shirts, and I continue doing this actually. Throughout probably 2016 to 2020, I was making kind of just silly disruptive shirts, and always kind of taking on an anti sort of feel to it, and just harkening back to a lot of the early streetwear culture, right? And I used to skateboard and snowboard when I was younger and was in that crowd. And so it was just very reminiscent, nostalgic, kind of art, wearable art that I used to do. And that got more serious, right? So New York Culture Club became a way to not only bridge culture through apparel and something that we wear on our skin every day, and express our culture to others through our art, so intimately, every day. But I thought to myself, how could I take this and help people meet their near-term resource needs? How could I create, something out of nothing? How could I point to the car in the driveway and say, you see that car? That could feed your family, right? And before Uber and Lyft, right? And have that person kind of understand what I was talking about. Well, that's what I say about your clothing, right? Is that there's that moment of, oh my gosh, I love your shirt, shoes, hat, glasses, sneakers, right? And so the chip behind you, right, the microchip in the Apple with the open structure means that we can all interchange back and forth, right, and experience technology and culture together. And so this is a near field communications chip or a subclass of radio frequency identification. So you can basically scan this with your phone, and it would be, say, embedded in the sleeve of a garment or somewhere else on a garment. And when somebody says, I love your, again, sweatshirt, you hold your sleeve out, they scan it, it launches to your personal point of sale system because you're the brand ambassador and you should be compensated, right, for that person being introduced to our culture as a brand, right? So it's basically monetizing clothing at the street level.
Dude, and that's probably one of the most innovative things, in my opinion, culturally since like ripped clothing. Whenever somebody like ripped jeans and then they were just like, no, this is how it's supposed to be worn. I feel like in 5 years, clothing's gonna have to be in some way, shape, or form RFID because people want to really authenticate stuff. And I live in Atlanta. You can probably go to any store or any like luxury mall, and people are wearing all this designer stuff, but it could be fake.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of videos where people like want to authenticate people's bags and all this kind of stuff. You've kind of cleared that gap, and or really just brought that gap in to being like, hey, you just have to scan it, and
And
then it
there's a
will
lot of
take
work
you.
to still be there's a lot of work to still be done, and I shouldn't say I'm the pioneer of all this, right? People have
Mm-hmm.
put NFC or RFID in clothing for quite some time, or they've tried it, right? It kind of has fallen by the wayside, but there was a Japanese brand in probably 2012 or 2013 who was embedding NFC to try to perform some functionality. The problem was is that the universe, I would say, wasn't really ready for it yet. So our phones didn't all have NFC readers in them, or they didn't have very good, accurate ones at the distance you needed to close in on. And there was no blockchain. So that's what has actually changed a lot of this is RFID and NFC has been used in a lot of different capacities, toll booths, cattle ear tags, all sorts of different technologies throughout the decades. But blockchain changes the game. And like you said, it certainly changes the game as far as authentication when you marry it with something like a non fungible token or a unique certificate of authenticity or authority for a physical item.
And how long have you been pondering this thought, or how long has this been festering in your brain?
This as far as tying near field communications chips or subcategories of RFID into clothing, about 3.5 years. So I've been, even though I was not pursuing these businesses as my full time up until, well, about a month ago, right? I was doing research every single night, every single weekend, and just really exploring every facet of what other companies have been doing. There's a couple of real leaders in this space, but they haven't painted the picture quite the way I'm going to.
No, you painted a pretty vivid picture, especially to all the people that do want to know and want to be up to date. You guys want to be right down here at the neurcultureclub.com. Just a quick little plug in for Brian Yurachek's baby here. You'll be able to buy all of the clothing that he's mentioning here as it releases. You'll be understanding everything that's coming out. He has a very interesting, what would you call your manifesto or your blog posts that you do in your spatial rooms?
Well, we do a weekday morning Twitter space program from 9 to 10 a.m., which is called the Radish. So it's a little bit of a play on the onion, but it is real news. It's not satire news. We just talk morning news about where markets are. Sometimes we talk about RFID, and embedded tech. Sometimes we talk about metaverse, which is for a whole other time. But then I release a weekly publication that I have started every Monday. So I'll be releasing another one tomorrow. It's called Follow the Leader. So that's tomorrow's release, and I mint 10 tokens, right? And I sign a copy of it because I got to be really egotistical there. So no, I make the unlockable content a signed copy of the article, and I mint 10 tokens. And I don't expect anybody to really go purchase them, but I want to put it out there as something that we're doing. We're creating blockchain powered publications. And if people want to be in support of it, the support is going to be via the technology itself. So, as you know, I'm an advocate for kind of forcing people into using these technologies for what I believe are some of the most important use cases, and not necessarily all this kind of expression that we're seeing now, even though it's good and it can push it to the forefront and have the collective consciousness have a conversation about these things. So I applaud different brands for getting involved, but I will also criticize them just the same if they do it in a manner that does not really utilize these technologies for what their true capabilities are. And a lot of these brands are really using this as kind of a near-term, marketing propaganda piece, or a way to just kind of get some new customers and then move on to the next new thing. I think these technologies are way more powerful than that.
Oh, they're they're the most powerful technology. I mean, people once they get on board to the Web3, understanding the nuances of it, blockchain, then people will stop throwing the NFT around. It's an
Mhm.
NFT.
Yeah.
I don't need to buy the NFT. But no, you guys have kind of blown that out of the water with just the functionality. I mean, it's gonna be something that you guys can wear, share, earn, and it has nothing to do with the actual NFT itself. It's about the garment, the clothing. But you did mention something earlier that you just went full balls to the wall with New Year's Culture Club. But what kind of took up your time before that?
Oh, well, I had a decade-long career managing Wall Street folks' money. So I was in private wealth management for with the same company, actually, Lennox Advisors. I was with them for almost 11 years, and I kind of came up the rungs with them. I was an operations associate, pushing paper, earning my keep at first for about 2.5 years. Then I became a portfolio analyst, and I did a lot more hard analyst duties. In fact, the radish was something that was born out of the analyst and I back then writing actually, that was a satire piece of financial news. So that's where the radish came from. Yeah, I was an analyst for quite some time. And then I worked my way up to being an asset manager, where at the time, I left a month ago or so. I was the lead asset manager and a vice president at the firm with a few $100 million under my management.
And was it and so we went from really into music, musicians,
Mhm.
fast forward New York Culture Club, there's 10 years in there. How did you get what was the entry point into finance management?
Well, my college degree. So I have an undergraduate degree in business management and strategic management. So that actually plays into what I'm doing now with my companies. A lot of
Yeah.
this is allocating of resources and trusting other people and empowering those other individuals to do what I know they can do best. But I went and got a master's degree in financial services. Almost immediately after getting out of undergrad. I was also in the Army Reserves. So simultaneously, as I was in undergraduate, I was in the 323rd Counter Intel, where I mainly did satellite work with them. So, there was a lot of different things that I was doing. Briefly, when I first got out of college, or when I was doing my grad degree, I was working as well. Funny enough, that was when I was playing in that wedding band. I was working as an insurance rep or a financial services rep. I would actually leave that job at 3 p.m., I think it was, and I would go to the bathroom. I would change into a uniform to go to a French bakery in Narberth, and I would sneak out of the building because I was embarrassed that I had to work this other job. And then I also would sneak out on my lunch break and I walked corgi puppies down the street. So I had these two puppies. One of them was Bren, and then this other one that was really mean to Bren. I forgot its name. But like I was like walking dogs, playing in a wedding band, going to school at night, working at in financial firm, and working at a French bakery all at the same
What was that? That's a workload that would crush 90% of people. What was the driving factor behind doing all of these things? Because that's true level of dedication.
I think I suffer from an energy affliction.
Oh, you just
it's
had.
it's it's just something that it's just something that's always nagging at me. I have anxiety, and I think it's probably an expression of my anxiety in some ways, putting that into my work. And my mind is constantly curious, and I think that's what I mean so much as an energy affliction. It's my mind, ever since I was very little, my mind is constantly curious and looking for all different types of information or things that I can absorb. And weirdly enough, if I'm not interested in something, it's very hard for me to learn because it doesn't really make much sense to me. So, like you
Mm,
talked about mathematics, it's actually perfect because people say like, "This is so weird. You're analytical and you're creative," and usually people are one or the other. But what's interesting is drumming is mathematics. So drums are math, right? So there's a quarter note, there's an eighth note, 16th note, 32nd note, right? So it's subdivided, right? So the way I hear music actually is very different from the way other people hear it because I hear like 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E. Like it's the way I like process patterns in my hearing. It's different, which is how I can express how I can hear a piece of music and sit down at a drum set and play it because it like comes the patterns like get in my brain. And so if I can associate math with something tangible, like a stock or a bond or a drum set or a whatever, it makes sense to me. But if you
mm-hmm.
tried to teach me like differential calculus, I was a horrible differential calculus student. I remember I think I got a like a C or a D like at one point in college in that class. And so I couldn't do like math that was like conceptual math, like the number I and that kind of stuff like made no sense to me. Very hard for me to grasp.
Yeah, I was the same way with the fact that I don't think I got higher than a C ever in a math class, but now I'm a data analyst for
Mm-hmm.
a transportation company and logistics. And it
Exactly.
becomes about like the patterns. I love how you mentioned the patterns.
Mm-hmm.
But now your story's kind of making a lot of sense. You've dipped your hand in a lot of different places and you've been able to pull out an amalgamation of information
Mm-hmm.
essentially. And so now you're the
That's my
2022.
culture, right? So
Yes.
you see, that's what it is. It's all just you right now. You're a little bit of your sister, your brother, your stepsister, your dad, or your mom, or this, and it's all.
And I think it's really beautiful, and that's why we had to get you on the Not Happy podcast, is because when you were saying that earlier, you mentioned it's about the pain, it's about the joy that that's involved in our culture as well. And
Mhm.
so you've had lot of highs and lows, but the way you've put it together is through artwork.
Mhm.
Can you kind of go into your art style and the different things that you've kind of shown me and how you've interpreted it in your mind, because
Yeah.
I know, and like I mentioned before, I usually made music from like 18 to 21. I was really just rapping. It was a lot of like the more conscious stuff like that. I'm not a drug dealer. Like, I would sell you something, but like I don't have a gun with me. I'm not gonna do none of that. So whenever people were like, dude, just make the music that everyone loves, it's like
Hmm.
I don't love that. And so
Reminds me of
now,
like Talib and Common and some of those guys. Like I used to listen to a lot of that stuff. Like it's good, like solid, intelligent communication of good ideas.
and and on top of that, it was just sometimes you want to disappear into a beat.
Hmm.
And so now lately, what I've been kind of like, I still had like a nagging sense of creativity in me, which is where the podcast came from, because it gives me a different. I get to talk to different people, different styles, different everything. But to me, at the end of the day, it's still therapeutic in the sense that hearing all these stories and what people are doing with it makes me tick for it. And so, what's kind of like the process before you get behind the canvas or before you start putting things together?
First of all, I love the slip up that you said pod kid. You said pod kid, right? And we call our people culture kids. And see, that's important though. That childlike curiosity is what I'm talking about, right? And
Yeah.
by the way, Keith Haring, the baby, that's what he was tapping into as well. So like the baby with the radiation
Yeah.
of it, right? Or the radiating lines. That's the same concept. And so these are things that repeat themselves in history, right? And these are patterns that other artists have spoken to and things that have happened before, which I think is really cool. That's what we really need to do is go back to the tape, and we'll talk about that at some point. But that's what blockchain does. It creates a chronological tape of history, right?
Yes, sir.
So as far as my physical art, so in the middle of the pandemic was really where I started to pick up my physical art again, right? So I did some sketching, some drawing, and my wearable art and certain things throughout, my teens and certain things. But it was never really something that I sat down every single day and really expressed myself on. And during the pandemic, I had really just kind of a shift in consciousness. And I made a choice. One day I just kind of decided that I was going to treat life a bit differently, and I was going to not be afraid anymore. Not be afraid of saying yes to certain things that I wanted to say yes to, and certain things that my gut was telling me, go in this direction. And I started to kind of just what I say, fall into the flow of the cosmic river, kind of just like work with the way that the universe was kind of trying to tell me to proceed. And I felt this overwhelming sense of purpose to do something, and I started to kind of express that through my hand in art. And my art took on really strange forms at first, because I would walk around like Home Depot sometimes during the pandemic just to get like some exercise and to get things to just like fix up, like do to keep busy. And I would start grabbing things off the shelves and wire and wood and metal and certain things, and then I started putting those together and making a lot of really hard physical art. So whether that be like wire sculptures that I have, or painting on like steel or glass, or like doing something just a little bit different, just to kind of show like the bridge between the physical and the artistic worlds, and being able to like really bridge that, and then making technology a part of that. So I started to see what was happening with the definition of ownership with smart contracts and blockchain technology, and the ability for an artist to now control the present and future value of their artistic creations in those secondary markets. So in other words, being able to embed a royalty, right, without getting too technical, being able to put a royalty on my work, sell that to someone else, and have that person sell it to someone else, and make, a royalty on those secondary market sales, and be able to potentially strike a more equitable balance between my artistic creations and what the world perceived those to be worth. And so I guess my art became very much involved with bridging the physical and the digital, and that took form in creating NFTs, or being one of the first people to create digital asset markers for my physical pieces of artwork.
Does your art, whenever you do make a piece, where does that come from? Does it come from anger? Are you like, do you wake up one day and you're like, I'm gonna just put shit together the best I can? Or is it like, or would you get drunk one evening or something and then you get angry and then you make something? Is or what would you describe your process as? Is it like free flowing?
Yeah. So my process is that I don't let anybody else obstruct my process, including myself. So exactly what you just said. I let art come to me and flow from me, and it happens at all different times of the day. A lot of my art earlier on would be done in the middle of the night, and I still do stuff in the middle of the night. A lot of the times I'll wake up and I'll have an idea, and I go and I do it right then. Sometimes pieces of artwork I have take months. I have a piece that's 6 months in the making, and I've added some things to it, and then I leave it, and then I come back to it when I feel that cosmic river telling me add something. And sometimes it takes a while for that to. I often say that the art presents itself to me, like
Mm-hmm.
it's and I did this awesome one of this. I've been doing this painting. This one's not finished. I've been doing this painting of this Victorian woman in a dress, and I keep kind of like posting the work in project progress and saying she's revealing herself to us, you know. And like it's kind of a silly thing, but it's true. Like it's the way I actually do it. I only paint her when I feel that she's called me to paint her. Because if I walk up and I just try to do something forcefully, it won't work. It won't work. Like that's not like real art. Like that's not to me. Like because if I try to force my hand, it's not going to come out right. It just doesn't. That's not, at least that's not I'm not technically skilled enough to just like be able to not feel my heart in it. It's some people may be that good. I'm not that good.
No, and that's honestly one of the most beautiful things you can say, because a lot of people get caught up with the writer's block,
Mm,
and they forget that the writer's block was actually a coined term by someone in the early 1900s because they missed their book deadline. And
mm.
so that's also like people's perfectionism speaking, where they feel like, oh, if I don't like, and that's kind of funny that you say that, the cosmic river will finish me. I will get this thing done whenever I want to get it done. And that's beautiful that you kind of don't like pigeonhole yourself. What's the long, and you said 6 months is the longest project you have in the works right now?
Yeah, there's one I've been posting on this one. This one's a wood piece. It has wire coming off of it. The guy's eye is like kind of coming out of the. It's spray paint. It's acrylic. Um, yeah, so it's I've been using a lot of different types of materials on it, and it's kind of like it's like a personification of like some of my feelings in like a character that's not me. It's like this little guy running, but it's not really a self portrait or anything. It's just kind of like some feelings and emotions, like kind of personified through this piece of work. But um, yeah, it's interesting how a lot of people, what you just spoke to is a luxury I also have, right? The fact that I don't have to like have a sense of urgency with my art. And see, that's the
Yeah.
problem, right? Is like when we do make it our living and it is difficult to sell art, it becomes very difficult to like express ourselves the right way, because it then is a sense of urgency. And then you
Yeah.
do have to move your hand, and sometimes you have to move your hand for what someone else says you got to do this commission for me, and you're like, I got to pay rent, so then you do it. And so like it's very interesting now that I am full-time an artist and a business owner. I now I don't like really have that sense of urgency to pay my bills. I'm blessed to have saved a good amount of money to be able to have like what I would call the foot off my neck a little bit to breathe.
Yeah.
But now that's actually why I take it as my obligation to show others that feeling. I like my goal in life, honestly, is to make things more beautiful for others, just enough so that they can see that they don't have to be afraid, like the same way that I feel. I want to give them the gift of a moment to feel like that, and then kind of hand them that ember and tell them that if they blow on that, like it's going to be okay. And I'll be back in a second and I'll help them blow on it. But I got to run to someone else and help give them an ember. And then I've got to tell them to blow on it. And I'm going to tell them to hold on. And then I'm going to run back to that other person. And then, like, that's what the rest of my life I've committed to doing.
Oh, and that kind of segues into the perfect so we got into the who, what, now we're gonna get into the why.
Mm,
Why do you feel like that's your purpose? And kind of, and I'll use myself as an example. during the 2008, my parents lost their house during the financial market crash. It went bankrupt in like a week. We got evicted super fast. And then I had like a certain hatred towards like realtors, real estate people. Like I was like, who the fuck would sell my dad a house he couldn't afford?
Yeah.
But it wasn't until got into high school AP that AP economics where like I understood the whole Lehman story and like why it wasn't, I was blaming the wrong people. And so I went and I worked towards getting my real estate license. I want to save up as much money as I can so I can build and create houses for people. And then I'm the bank. So like if you want to move into a house that I finance it to you for like 10 years. After 10 years, the house is yours. You can do whatever you want to. Simply because I couldn't stand not being the solution anymore. And so that's why like everything's going to lead me to there. And so understanding kind of like why you are going to sacrifice your life or the rest of your life for this is pretty important. And I really want to know why.
Yeah. This is something I felt from a very young age. It's weird to say that, but because of some of the things that I spoke about, like my parents getting divorced when I was 3, and I had to deal with some mature subjects and topics from a very young age that kind of jarred me into understanding what life was capable of serving up.
Yeah.
And I suppose that created a situation where my brain matured more rapidly, maybe than others. And so I was very understanding of some seriously emotional topics from a very young age. And um, I always had kind of a sadness in some ways for what I saw were the things that were going wrong in the world. Um, and over time, as I've gotten a little wiser and grown up, and now I'm 36 years old, um, in the past couple years, I've realized that we seem to always have better tools that we create for these
Yeah.
things, and for doing things, and we do strike better chords of efficiency over time, right? And uh, we've had amazing technological innovation, and I think a lot of people take it for granted that most of the things that happen in our households and in our hands in developing economies are magic. Like are just unbelievable. Flying somewhere and having Wi-Fi, just anything. It's just crazy. And I think it's important to note that not everyone's been along for the ride.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people actually who have been under, unfortunately, my foot, your foot, a lot of other people's foot has been stomping out the breath of a lot of other people. And that's not like I'm saying we should sit here and self flog ourselves, right? I mean, but there's maybe a responsibility once you have an awareness of this, right? Not everyone has an awareness of this. I felt like I had an awareness of what we're doing and the fact that we could be doing things a bit better. And it's pretty obvious from the data. And that's
Mm-hmm.
something I'm a big proponent of is data, science, and truth. There is a truth. And we might not know it in the immediacy of the moment, but the truth reveals itself through data, and we can be stewards of data and measure things. And what isn't measurable is politics and the oil that runs through that engine, which is fear. That is emotional, that's behavioral, and that isn't required in many cases. Data, science, and truth that it breeds over time, that's where I think we need to emphasize to get us to a place where we can all get better together. So, my mission is to disrupt, to be a disruptor of the consciousness, because the tools have been getting better. We haven't. We have a
Yeah.
problem. There's a crisis in human consciousness that needs to be solved. And I'm not the first person to say this, right? And what's interesting is a lot of other people who have had what I would call, come to the crossroads and made a choice and gone in the direction that I've gone. These same people try to come back and tell us to not be afraid. They tell us that it can be different. things can be different. We can use these tools for good. We don't have to take the hammer and keep hitting ourselves in the head. There's a nail, and we can see that nail if we pay attention to data and truth and science, because it's leading us towards that nail. And we need to start swinging that hammer in that direction and stop swinging it back into our heads, which I think we've been doing for far too long. And someone needs to stand up and have the courage. And again, we've seen these people throughout time, whether it be, I don't know, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, uh, Lincoln. I mean, and interestingly enough, to quote Bill Hicks, we kill those people.
Real people that wanted to make a real change. And it kind of goes into an idea that I've been pushing towards people, that everyone wants to save the world, but everyone just has to do their part.
and
Just
and, and that's I guess what I'm asking everyone to do. And I'm showing up, and all I can do is be accountable to myself and show up every day, and then try to show others through my actions, that I'm willing to go through, like you were saying, the short-term discomforts to get to the long-term outcomes. I'm even willing to take a lot of that, and show people, in a state of frustration a lot of times, like try to show people what's possible. I'm willing to go through that frustration because it's that important. We don't have time for something else. Like, we've got very powerful technologies that are compounding on themselves at a rapid rate now, and if we go in the wrong direction, it's going to compound us in the wrong direction. Like, this is very dangerous. And I think people need to understand that we need to make the right choice. And there is a right choice. And fear and politics has not solved the problem. We've given trillions of dollars in aid to developing countries, and we just couldn't solve the problem. I mean, that's
it's a
absurd.
fact.
It doesn't make any sense. It's misallocation of resources. It's not being accountable, right, for where those resources have gone after they've gone to those parties. And it was the intention of them never getting to the right place in the first, So that's the problem.
Well, I'm glad that without me even having to ask you, we kind of got into what makes Brian not happy. And and
And
that's
it's
kind
not
of
not not I know you use the term not happy, but we know, right? It's like, what disrupts me, what makes me want
yes.
to do better.
Yeah, because here we don't focus on, the actual word not happy, but
Mhm.
really what change comes from that.
Right.
And really at the end of the day, you're doing your part. And that's kind of beautiful to see your growth in A, as a speaker, B, as a business leader, hopping from what was safe to now you're out in open waters, but you don't realize that you're the shark in open waters. And so that's why I tell people that they got to jump in when they can. And so we do have one more question for you. What is it that you're looking forward to the most in the next 6 months of the year?
Oh, geez. Well, as you kind of said, now fully assuming this person that I've kind of been for the last few years, and needed to kind of be publicly, I'm really excited to tell this story, to get out there and to tell people what I'm all about, and to feel free, to speak on that, because before, as you may know, I had securities licenses, and I couldn't just speak freely about topics of capital markets, and certain things that are intertwined in crypto and blockchain. So, it's sharing this gargantuan knowledge, base that I, have painstakingly put together, and am so wildly passionate about. It's taking all of that and now expressing it via, my companies, and being able to, build with everybody together. Like I said, to get to a better place all together, and to be able to affect the change in bringing all those people who aren't coming to work every day because we're not meeting their basic resource needs. I'm very excited to start telling the story of how we have some very, very innovative ideas on how we're going to bring those people to work and get them food, drinking water, healthcare, and bring them online, and not just the World Wide Web, online in life, to be able to come up with the next idea that drives us into the next 100, 200 years.
Randy, it sounds like you have my vote. So if you ever decide to be vote for or go into any governing office, you got my vote, man.
I'll
Um,
fractionalize myself and turn myself into an NFT before I go into politics.
Dude, before you go, I want you. I tell this to everyone. I swear to goodness, I'm like Brian with the chip. This chip is on his hand.
Oh yeah, I got one on my finger.
This chip is on his hand. I mean, whenever he was like, "Dude, I work like with this new tech, and we're really doing it. Like, look at my hand," and I was like, "Oh shit." Every doubt in my mind just disappeared. But I want to thank you so much, Brian. I know
Thank
your
you.
schedule is super busy, but for the fans, this won't be the first or the last time that we're gonna have the great Brian Yurachek on here. We really want to get him for the Culture Club. Expect the next one on his uh, big long-term baby project, Metahattan, and
Mhm.
then further along, he'll be a happy mainstay here with us, going on to the finances and any other shenanigans he may be up to. Well, thank you so much, Brian. That is today's Not Happy
Thank
podcast
you.
episode. Um, any closing thoughts?
No, no, just culture is code. Culture is literally we live by, and culture is literally code now.
Culture is code. And check that out at newyorkcultureclub.com. Follow him on Twitter at Culture is Code. And then let him know what your favorite part about the episode was. Alrighty, guys. We'll see you later.
Thanks, everyone.